So moved.
Second.
Second by Rosendahl, discussion, roll call.
Kroll,
Yes.
Rosendahl,
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
And I think it's off. Turn it over to Assistant City Manager Curtis Brown. Curtis.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members, for sharing your time with us tonight, and also the members of the Plan and Zoning Commission. Thank you very much for offering your time to be brought up to speed on the downtown master plan, and very importantly, to provide your input and feedback on a couple questions that our consultants will lead us through tonight. Staff began working with Bolton and Menk last month, and so we're at an early stage in this process, and we thought this is a great time to make sure we get in front of these two policy-making bodies to ensure that we're all tracking on the downtown master plan and where we're heading. This is on the city staff side. In interdepartmental effort. So we have representatives from the city manager's office, communications, economic development, community development, and engineering. So we are ensuring that all of the important perspectives inside the city organization are represented. And I will now turn it over to Andrew Dresner from the Bolton and Menk Twin Cities, Minnesota office, who will introduce the members of the team who are here tonight, and then take you through the rest of the work session until 5:50, when they know we need to be done to prepare for the council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Curtis. Thank you all very much, Mayor, members of the council, planning and zoning. It's a pleasure to be here. As Curtis said, my name is Andrew Dresner. I'm an urban planner and designer for Bolton and Menk. And I am joined here today with a couple of my colleagues I work closely with. Chris Brewer from AECOM will be providing economics and real estate expertise on the project. And Casey Byers, principal in charge of Bolton and Menk, will be providing landscape architecture and design support on the project, or leadership on the project as well. So we have on our agenda, can you see the screen, or?
Yes.
You can see the screen, okay. All right, let's go like that. How about that? On the agenda, we just have a couple items. Most of it's going to be listening to you as we ask a couple questions, but I do want to take just a couple moments to give an overview of the process, and then an overview, very high level overview of the downtown chapter of the comprehensive plan that you adopted in about a year ago, I believe, or maybe a little bit more than a year ago. So in terms of overview of the process, we'll just do a quick who, what, where, when, why, and how. So the who, you've met three of the key team members on the project. And just as the project internally is interdisciplinary, Curtis mentioned the many departments that are coming together. On the consultant side, it's interdisciplinary as well. So we'll be bringing to the project landscape architecture, design, economics, real estate, transportation planning, architecture, bringing all these disciplines together to make sure that this plan is as thorough as it possibly can be. In general, we've organized our team under three sub areas that your comprehensive plan is also defined for the downtown plan, and that is sense of place, access and mobility, and land use and development. I'll talk just a bit more about that a little bit later on. So that's sort of the who on our side. There is a who, of course, on your side, not just yourselves, not just your staff, but also your community. We'll be meeting with a broader swath of the community throughout the project, and more specifically, tomorrow we'll be meeting with a stakeholder group, as well as a series of focus groups, as well as a group of residents, and that will all be happening tomorrow at the fire station in the study area. So that's kind of a broad picture of the who. In terms of the how we go about this, the graphic you see on the screen here, it kind of gets you into our head a little bit in terms of how we think about how cities and downtowns operate and come together. In effect, we think of places like this as a series of systems, not unlike your body, where you have a neurological system, a muscular system. Places are very similar. And we aim to strengthen them all, but also to integrate them together so that the strength of the individual layers are amplified. Since we see places this way, that's why we bring an interdisciplinary approach to the project. So sort of the big arc of this study area of the downtown is, if you think of it, that it's about transitioning from the place as a corridor, which is what most people maybe think of it, even describe it, and a corridor being an entity in a city that facilitates movement more than anything else, transitioning from thinking of the place as a corridor to thinking of it as a downtown or as a place. It will still facilitate movement through, but the balance of the emphasis is more about being within, the experience of being within the place. So the broad arc of downtown, or the broad arc of this, is transitioning from a corridor to a place. And this is one of the ways that we'll be looking at it. In terms of the when, how this project, when this project happens, we've just started it under contract in July or so. So we're just in the beginning, and we're in the information gathering stage, where we're pulling both hard data and soft data. So the hard data, numbers, things like that, physical on the ground things. The soft data is the conversations that we'll be having, and I mentioned several of them tomorrow, as well as with you today. So bringing together both hard data and soft data in the beginning of the process. And then working through the bigger issues that were defined in the comprehensive plan throughout the project. We'll be coming back to you somewhere in the middle of the project, somewhere around the turn of the year, January, thereabouts, and then once more again towards the end. And we'll be keeping the community informed along the way with outreach efforts along the way. So it's not a closed process. Be as transparent as we possibly can. Just a little bit about the comprehensive plan now, and then I'll turn it over to some questions. This is basically the study area. So it's stretching from the mall on the east or on the right-hand side of the image across to 72nd or thereabouts. So in general, this is the study area. It's mostly what is around Douglas Avenue. We can say a block or so to each side. I think one of the ways maybe to describe this area is it's an area that sort of started as a crossroads, quickly became a mini corridor, and then the city started growing really quickly out to the west. So it's really first generation stuff. It never really got its second generation of investment. The comprehensive plan, which you guys know well, you adopted about a year ago, it has a chapter in it. It's a citywide document, of course, but it has a single chapter, 12 pages, that's just about downtown. Okay, and it says this area will become Urbandale's downtown. Densifying, changing the experiences within, improving Douglas Avenue, et cetera. There's a series of recommendations. And in fact, those recommendations are shown on this image here, about 15 of them up top in the purple, gray, and green boxes. And they're grouped into those three categories I mentioned before: land use and development, access and mobility, and sense of place. Our job is to take those recommendations that were done at a high level and to test them through policy, through design, and through economics, and to come out the other end with a master plan for downtown Urbandale. The master plan will include preliminary roadway cross-sections. It'll include an implementation strategy. It'll include visualizations to understand what it is, what downtown will look like and how it will operate in the future. What we were told the downtown plan will not include is recommendations for further study. This project will end with firm recommendations for implementation. We're not going to say study anything more. Okay, we were told by Curtis and team to do that. So that gives you sort of a broad overview of the process, of the team, and of the chapter in the comprehensive plan. So we're going to transition into a couple questions with you, facilitating a conversation. Chris is going to take us on to the first one with a little bit of additional information. Okay.
I'm always fond of saying moments like this, we're definitely not setting policy. The question itself is simple enough, but there's some extra weight we want to add to it. So in a sentence or two, how would you describe downtown Urbandale 10 years from now? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing? What memories will you have? But here's the weight we need to add. More so than any point in the last 4 years, we're at this very unique moment in time where construction costs are moderating. There is very clearly pent-up demand for housing across the board, whether it be rental, owner-occupied. There's a need for housing to be built. Retail is healthy for the first time in 10 years. And we're sitting at the perfect moment to lay out policy. Like the decisions we're making in the next 12 months are laying the groundwork for a strong argument for a solid growth cycle over the next several years. So thinking intentionally about the choices we make now, we're at a great moment to be having this conversation. So again, if we can start, again, this notion of what do we think this place will look like in 10 years, but acknowledging the weight of this current moment, thinking about that. Who would like to start?
We'd like to put you on the spot if possible, to be respectful of everyone's time, and start. Right at the beginning, you can pass the question, but if you do pass, I'll come back to you. So
So are you seeking input or opinions? Or
in a sentence, how would you like to describe downtown Urbandale
Oh.
10 years from now? What will you be experiencing? What will you be seeing?
I hope it's much more vibrant and dense and looks more like the East Village with some of the 4 or 5 story apartments with retail on the first floor. That would be my vision in 10 years.
One of the things, like, I'd like to overhear people around the community, but also in the metro say, but have you been to Urbandale for blank? Like that's the kind of vibe that I feel like we should be shooting for, is everybody in the metro thinking, ooh, this is a really cool place to be because there's unique experiences, there's unique businesses that you're not gonna find elsewhere too, and having that usage time spread out over the day to like a morning, a lunch, an afternoon, an evening, weekends, like having the place pulsing at all reasonable times, obviously. And easy to access, easy to walk to, easy to cross the street, back and forth, get to everywhere within a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you.
Vibrant, walkable, places where you can, have coffee, grab ice cream, have one-on-one conversations, family-friendly, and everything else they said. Mixed-use space, for sure.
Perfect.
They're stealing all the thunder, but vibrancy was the first thing I was gonna mention, but, that was the first word that came in my head before anybody started answering. But, I like what Blake said about, at different hours of the day as well, not just one or two, not just evenings, not just noon hour, but have that sense of vibrancy at different hours of the day, a dense use, a walkable, livable type of use, and different types of uses.
Yeah, the words that come to mind, just sort of going through the presentation, experiencing it, hearing what everybody else has provided for feedback, living, interacting, growing, and then also a very diverse space in whatever forms that may be.
I can just copy and paste what everybody else has said and count those for my words also. But the density and seeing a true kind of taller buildings with, like Coralville's Rivers Landing area and some of those areas that have done some redevelopment that look really nice would be pretty cool to see in Urbandale.
I live down there. I've walked to the coffee shop to meet my grandson and a couple of his friends. When we wrap that up, we head over to Riemann Music for a little concert, and then we have some ice cream. And then they beg me to go some store that I buy a gift for them. That's kind of my vision.
That was really
this took us right there. I like that. Well, I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. Came to this community as a neighborhood planner for the city of Des Moines, assigned to the Highland Park neighborhood. And this was 1999. And the 70th and Douglas intersection was what people wanted. We had just done the street, Urbandale just done the streetscape there. That was what Highland Park wanted to be. We came over, we talked to Brad Zahn, we met with some other folks. 25 years later, things are totally different. I'm sitting here, I'm not working in the city of Des Moines, but I look at Highland Park and it took a long time to get there, but that's what I want to see in Urbandale. It is the up and coming neighborhood, commercial, adding apartments, those sorts of things. So I think, and we have a few bones remaining that we can build off of historic nature or, original nature. I love like River Landing, but that was like invented out of nothing. I'm from Iowa City, so I have a lot to say about Coralville, but I have a lot to say about everything. But that I would like to see us like just not take 25 years like it did in Highland Park, but just become like, the cool place to go. Valley Junction's kind of always had that. It's definitely on the upswing now, but that's what I want to see.
I'd like to, two things. I'd like to see it be unifying. Right now, if you're in west side of Urbandale, which is where I live, and if I ask my neighbors, where's downtown Urbandale, they go, Urbandale is downtown? I never knew. So unifying. And then our sign up there says uniquely Urbandale. I want it to be unique. We have a lot of templates that could be used. I would use Ingersoll as one that's most closely similar to this. As far it is a thoroughfare, but they're trying to develop it, and it's you're talking about a mile. Valley Junction is 6 blocks. East Village is 4 blocks. This is a mile. Ingersoll is trying to do that, and it's taken 20 years to do that. So what can we do that's uniquely Urbandale, so that people get the sense it's unifying? They're like, I live in Urbandale, and this is a cool part of our city. And so that's my vision. So when in 10 years or less, we can say, I live in Urbandale, let me tell you about my city.
And we have a newcomer. Hi. Would you like to jump in? And you can see on the screen the question that we've been going around, that's been going around. You've heard a couple
We're not
inches.
setting policy tonight.
Yeah.
No, for myself personally, what I'd like to see 10 years from now is just a destination. We have, in my opinion, a unique area with Merle Hay Mall being something that we can build around, and hopefully, depending on how that shapes up in the next 10 years, that's something that we can anchor ourselves to help build off of, and hopefully create something that people want to go to. Right now, if you look at all of our sister cities and Des Moines as a whole, they all have places that attract people to come there. And for the most part, we don't have a lot of things to attract people. We don't have an amphitheater. We don't have a city square that has, a walking mall around it. We don't have really anything to draw people in.
All right. We're making quick time here. We went all the way around. Hopefully I wasn't too tough. I think we have time. We can open it up if there are other thoughts that may have come through after hearing other people speak. If we have time for it.
I think one of the questions could be, you had talked about a 5-story building. We always think about 2 different ways of expressing density. One is we could be talking about townhomes, which are not tall but dense, or we can talk about a 5-story building, which is tall. A number of you talked about the idea of density. But if we think about that expression as, street level retail with 4 stories of apartments above, that's a tall building in that context. Is that something we should be pushing the envelope on, or, again, it's mostly a single-family neighborhood right now, so there's gonna have to be some sensitivity, but what are your sort of thoughts about how hard we push on some of these concepts, maybe?
Well, as someone who lives literally a block off of the area, I mean, there is plenty of apartment living in that general vicinity. I mean, I'm in favor of go big or go home. I mean, density is, we need housing. In Urbandale, we need housing throughout the metro, however we can get the most housing. I mean, that creates vibrant neighborhoods too, if you have people living and working and doing business in your neighborhood. So I'm okay with going up. And I don't think the neighborhood will have an issue with it.
You don't think?
I don't think the neighborhood would have an issue with it.
I think the more, like, if we provide the density too, that's gonna give more opportunities for businesses to come in that would require more people in that general area. I think one of the things I've heard with, like, especially out west, when people are asking for restaurants, like, you kind of need the people in the area before the restaurants start to think, oh, yes, you know what, this is going to be a good investment for us because we have the people, like the customer base around it. So just want to make sure that we set ourselves up for that base of activity that brings in some of those very exciting places or interesting places too.
Any other thoughts on that topic?
I think I should clarify affordable housing as well, because there is a bus, there's bus and mass transit that comes to Merle Hay Mall. So this is a really prime location for getting affordable housing integrated too.
Do we need to distinguish, say, senior housing and the ability to age in place?
We need that too. Yes, and yes, and yes.
That was part of my vision, in case
Oh,
no one
yes.
noticed my age.
Maybe the last thing I would ask on is, we've talked about retail, we've hinted at cultural, we think about recreation, think about water features, spray pads, water parks, again, more of a recreational, kid-focused amenity, not a water park per se, but an amenity to anchor the district. Again, thinking about your story of the kids getting ice cream, and typically there's a water feature or a spray park to play in.
Yeah, I would like to see, like, when you think of apartments, you're like, oh yeah, like young people getting apartments for their first time or something, but like have a broad spectrum of ways that you can live downtown with a family. You can walk out your front door and like there's a park nearby that you can go to with your family. Make sure that people don't have to leave downtown to have a family, like they can stay there if they want to.
If I'm not mistaken, there are a couple schools within stone's throw of Douglas, so it seems to me it's a very reasonable place to raise a family.
I'm envisioning some level of intermittent green space as well, but at the same time, to achieve the walkability we want, you want places where people want to stroll around and the things they want to look at and see, and it's not always just green. It's also got some level of the retail you've talked about, but just little places to stop in.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like pocket parks almost, where
Yeah.
like there's seating that's kind of fun and unique and different. That if, and there's small green space where if you want to kick the ball around or some of the small scale, you could do that. I mean, because we have Lions Park, that's not far. Jensen Elementary is not far, and it has a pretty significant park. Olmsted is not far, it's right by Lions. So, yeah, we have a really nice spray, whatever we call those, spray grounds.
Yeah. I've been to some parks that are really small yet very green, yet intensely green in terms of being able to interact with elements that are there. And I should probably try and find some of those pictures for you.
I have some pictures
Okay.
too from some in Nashville.
But the idea of perhaps the idea of smaller pocket parks
More intimate, yeah.
that are closely associated with businesses, so that businesses can help animate them or program them or keep them alive.
I think somebody else mentioned like interesting seating like public seating options that, is it art? Is it seating? Is it, that encourages a destination? Ideally, Amy and I were having a conversation last night about, because both of our families were hard selling us to go out for ice cream separately. And we live in very different parts of the community, but the Urbandale doesn't have like a local ice cream place. So make that happen for us.
That's okay too.
We'd probably be better off. But just interest, I mean, like, that's a part, is it, park seating, water, green, I mean, I don't know. There's ways to incorporate it.
Yeah, place to play chess over here and do something more active over there, something really green, something more urban, something artsy, something more sporty, the variety.
There's a saying in our business, people like to be where they see people. It's sort of like, duh, but it's true. When people congregate, people like to be around, people like to be around gathering. So these small spaces that maybe are related to businesses, maybe they're not, if they're outdoors and they attract people, they will attract more people. It's just people like to be where they see people.
And I can't remember where we thought we would be citing a farmer's market. But something that would, where we might cite a farmer's market. I was just recently at a park where it's normally a park, but once a week, they already had the pergolas, if you will, the protection. No one even needed to bring in a tent exactly, but they could have it was set up for a farmer's market as well as for play and strolling and all of that.
Is there currently a farmer's market in Urbandale?
No.
Anything else to make sure that I'm pivoting fully around?
I would just add one more thing of, interconnectedness, and I would use the example of the trail system, which is kind of cut off by this particular area. I mean, you see, at least on the map, you see 3 trails maybe that would potentially pass through it, but haven't really been bridged, so.
That's a really good point. Accommodating cyclists through this area and to this area is going to be important for its success. I'm glad you bring that up. And that's brought up in the comprehensive plan.
Right, and people would have to get to it, but also it might be, people may be just passing through, like I think others have said.
Exactly.
I'd just call out public art too, like keeping that in mind as we go through the process. When a building is being redeveloped, how can in public art be incorporated that? Is it a mural? Is it a facade? Is it plantings? Is, being creative about what you put into that space so that.
Or can it be a part of the redesign of Douglas Avenue?
Right.
Is there space reserved for it?
Yeah.
Is that space vertical? Is it about vertical things? Is it on the surface?
Yeah.
Certainly are opportunities there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we go to the second question? In a sentence or two, do you have any concerns as we start this process? We'll start over here. Let's go around again.
I would just say go bold. Don't, whatever you would recommend, let's try something different and not exactly like East Village and not exactly like downtown West Des Moines. Let's try something that's bolder, different, but take some elements. And I like Marcus's idea of let's get some bike trails through there. It's not going to be easy to do because of the density of houses and how it lays out, but be bold on how we could do something different.
The concerns.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern is resistance from existing businesses. I think that in the preliminary conversations that our economic development folks have had with some of the businesses in that general area, it hasn't been necessarily all positive in our vision for what we want to see downtown grow into. So I think that's a big concern of mine, is just the resistance that we're going to face to trying to do this.
Okay. And we'll be meeting several of them tomorrow and throughout the process.
One of my main concerns is the accidental creation of a parking nightmare or lack of future capacity, just in how do we get people into the area? Because in theory, it's not just going to be people that are there and in the immediate area. There are going to be people that want to come from the broader area. So where do we put some of that traffic? How do we get people in without just having parking like 3 deep through the street or something like that? And then just making sure that we don't build this plan in such a way that it cuts off easy access from the surrounding neighborhoods too. Like, we'll want to be able, like, if you're coming at it from the south, we'll want to make sure that you can get in. Like, you don't have to go way around to get into downtown. Like, there's ways you can sneak in through all different areas so that it just kind of all sucks the community from around it in to the downtown area.
Don't allow it to become an island of a place.
Yeah, I don't want to see it like, you start on the beginning of downtown and it is just, there's no way to walk out or bike out or anything. Yeah, you just have to go all the way through.
Right, right. Well, you have a grid that's in place that theoretically should provide that kind of movement, access, choice, porosity, all those sort of things. So many places don't have a grid to start with. So you have one that's pretty good, pretty good. Concerns?
I think for me, the concerns is, kind of where we're at right now is we have nightlife that we don't necessarily want. So making sure that we design it in a way that we don't have an unintended consequence of our current situation. I think compiling enough land to be able to do something meaningful is going to be a challenge. And I think too, making sure that we don't get in our own way with our own zoning and our own regulations that really stymie our own ability to grow. Those are probably the concerns right now.
Just a point on that. Chances are, given your current regulations, I'm pretty sure, given your current regulations, you could not build what you want. So one of the outcomes of this will be recommendations on how to change some of those regulations so that they help pave the way for what you do want. So hopefully getting you out of the way, in a sense.
Yeah, and getting developer feedback too. I mean, we need to be able to have a location that they're going to want to build as well.
Yep. Sir.
Mine's more of a mix between Jeff and Larry, really. First of all, I mean, I agree with Jeff. Let's not be too timid or let's not be too reserved. If we're going to do this, let's be bold. But by the same token, I also want to make sure it's harmonious with the folks we have there, and then that it's the investors that we currently have there want to see this as well. So kind of blending both of those concerns and saying, let's do this, let's do it right, let's be bold, but let's also make sure that we're doing it consistent with what our investors downtown want to see as well. So
I'm glad you referred, you talked about current investors. Way back when one of my mentors said, planning is one thing, it is increasing investor confidence. That's all you're doing. You're trying to increase investor confidence in a place. But then he always follows that up, or he would always follow that up by saying, and when I say investor, I don't necessarily just mean developers, speculators. People who live there now are investors. they are investing their time in the play, they're not just investing the dollar, so the definition of investor, is wide. And in planning, what we're trying to do is raise the investor confidence of lots of people in a place, so. Okay, let's keep moving around. Sir.
Yeah, so I made notes on, opposition / developer buy-in. I think that's key. There was comment about regulatory or policy treatment. I agree with that. The other thing I would note with these two items is sort of capital planning and ensuring that infrastructure is able to keep up with it. And that's not even just from a dollars perspective, but also just supporting infrastructure that aligns with the planning down the road. So the types of infrastructure we would need. And yeah, that's all I have for now. I may come back to you on a couple more comments.
Sure.
I'll just say I used to work for Windsor Heights and was involved when they redeveloped areas along University and Hickman Road. And I mean, the city spent a lot of money. It's really expensive to acquire parcels, especially parcels that have buildings with businesses in them. If you're going to acquire those, it can be extremely expensive. But as you said, if you're just going to go one little parcel at a time, you're not going to really get the vision you want. So there's just got to be a lot of political will to move forward to get the vision that everybody has down and the willingness to spend the money to go forward with it, because it won't be easy. But I think, Windsor Heights saw it too. Once you do certain sections, certain areas, some of it the city doesn't have to take the lead on it because others see the potential there for other things. So, but there's got to be that first kind of bold step moving forward.
I kind of ditto everything I've heard so far. I really want to make sure that this does not languish in any way, that after we get the ball rolling, we keep it rolling, and that we make sure it's sustainable over time. But a concern that hasn't quite come up is, this is if we build it and they don't come. I'm a little worried about that. There's a real culture of Douglas being something we drive through, and that's really for the entire metro area. So as we do this work, I hope we can find opportunities for transitioning and marketing and starting to get that culture idea to shift.
So just a word about that. The concern about if we build it, will they come? So it is true that places sometimes invest in big ideas and people don't come. What I would say is the idea here, in a sense, is to build the place following sort of time-tested dimensions, time-tested ways of building towns and building cities, stuff that has worked for 3,000 years. In the last 50 years, we've deviated from, 50, 70 years, we've deviated from basic town building practices or city building practices. So we won't bring you any, we'll bring you big ideas, bold, it'll be bold, but it won't be untested. And so I don't foresee coming forward with risky ideas that we suggest you build because people will come. It will be time-tested, solid ideas that will also be bold.
Okay.
Yes.
I think most people have touched on it. I am, go big or go home kind of personality to a fault sometimes. So I want to be everything to everyone, and I know that that's not, we need to find what our niche is and figure out how to do that well. I don't think we know what it is yet, but I think maybe that's what you guys figure out. But I think having a mix of housing and retail is crucial for me for a successful project. And keeping the businesses that we have. I mean, Christian Photo is like you know, the only place to do what they do, that does what they do in the metro and, you know, maybe the state. So it's like, what can we do? We want to keep that business thriving, but also bring other thriving businesses to support it.
I stepped into Christian Photo today, and yeah, that's quite the store. It's very cool. I'm sure they bring people from all over the state. There's just not a whole lot of them around.
No.
And I mentioned to some degree the bike shop, maybe to a lesser degree the bike shop, but that's still a special, as well as the music store. There definitely appear to be some unique and special retailers
Yep.
that might help start to define the niche of the place.
Similar to what everybody said, is making sure we get a return on the investment that we'd be making in time, energy, blood, sweat, tears, money. And also committing to ourselves to it that we're gonna keep hold. Can we do this and some of the other things in the comprehensive plan? For example, not to go on a tangent, we've got a lot of land north of the interstate, which is a blank slate. And at one time in one of the proposals was we could superimpose an entire district, shopping, retail, housing district in that land. And again, we don't have to talk to neighbors because there are no neighbors. So would that be a better investment? I don't know. So I want to make sure that if we said we're going to go down this road, that we've done that same, because I don't know if we have the financial resources, the energy resources, whatever resources we need to do both in the next 20 years. I don't know. That's in the long-range plan, but that's a concern. I'm like, we haven't done anything of this magnitude for the last 20 years. What is going to be different that says we can now do it in the next 20 years? ROI on this and making sure that doesn't prevent us from getting a good ROI on future developments, where there may not be as many obstacles.
Okay, we went around on concerns. I'll open it up if there are any others.
I would just add one more thing, just as I was making notes. You have a process up there of how you're gathering feedback along the way. You had sort of a Gantt chart up there. And I don't know if you can scroll up.
Sure.
Just from my benefit. I only saw it briefly. But as you're doing your engagement, your outreach, I've always viewed engagement and outreach as being sort of continuous and iterative. And, one in which that you have multiple ways of gathering feedback. So that would be a concern to me, is that maybe you only have these design workshops, but not other funnel systems for feedback. And, that sort of falls under that consensus building. But then also within that, balanced outcomes. Is it possible for us to objectively achieve all the same things that we want to without alienating existing businesses, landowners, et cetera, that kind of thing?
Fair point, because choices will have to be made. So I think that's a really fair point, and I also appreciate the point about having sort of continuous feedback. And so we'll be working closely with your communications department to make sure that, do our best to make sure that happens. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay. Casey, Chris, Curtis, any other questions?
Questions in general, I think, about the process.
Yeah, are there any questions that you might have for any of us about the process, about the project, about the possible outcomes?
I just wanted to make a comment that you have a wonderful resource on your staff in Emily Lawson, or Emily Naylor. As an native urban Dalian, she, I know, is not engaged in this project, but I would encourage you to include her in some of the brainstorming as someone who, while she lives in Beaverdale now, this community is near and dear to her, I know, so.
Will do. Absolutely.
What else do you need from us?
This
in the
is
short
good.
term?
This is great. I mean, this was intended to be sort of a quick temperature read for you all, so that we launch in the right direction. So this is perfect.
One thing I might highlight is something we learned as part of the flag design process is that as soon as you put together the plan and start implementing it, that's only the first half. So recommendations on how to keep this alive long-term too, like, let's say we redo the street and do 3 other things, like, we can't say, yep, we did it. We revitalized downtown. Like, what can we do to keep it going?
And dovetailing with that, just sort of this ongoing communications so that we're always sort of knowing where we are in the process. I appreciate the Gantt chart, but be kind of nice to have a routine update of sorts to understand where we are.
And you're referring mostly throughout this process.
Throughout this process and then post-process, I mean, as we're trying to start with the more implementation pieces as well. Yeah. Any recommendations you have about that would probably be appreciated.
All right.
I don't want to be Mr. Obvious, but there are probably 4 or 5 pretty obvious locations along Douglas that could be ripe for development. And maybe if you could suggest just putting a square or a rectangle and saying, here's an area we think you could access. And this is where you could put the 3-story with retail and an ice cream shop on the first floor. And here's another one that you could do this block, this block, this block. And the last question I had was, why were you talking about the Who and why are you not into the Led Zeppelins? And you started this whole you kept talking about the Who the whole time.
I'm happy to chat about Led Zeppelin.
All right, we'll do that later.
And the East Street Band and.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you again in later in the fall, early in the winter.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for the P&Z for being here tonight.